From Amerivet Securities, a service-disabled, veteran-owned broker-dealer in New York City, we bring you Compass Check, a podcast created by veterans for veterans. The military uses a compass to navigate air, land, and sea. Now, Compass Check is here to help you navigate your transition into the corporate workforce. Our goal is to reach military veterans and members of the veteran community, empower and connect them with a multitude of resources that will ultimately set them up for success after leaving the military. I'm your host, Army veteran James Fitzgerald. Let's get moving. Cushman Wakefield is a global commercial real estate services firm. The company's corporate headquarters is located in Chicago, Illinois, and they are among the world's largest commercial real estate services firm, with over 50,000 team members in over 60 countries. My guest today is Cushman Wakefield's project leader for the Military and Veteran Program, Matt Disher. Here's our conversation. Welcome back to Compass Check, something that I've heard my entire life, specifically about real estate. It's all about location, location, location. So for me, I thought it was very appropriate for my location to stream from you today would be my very own home, because it's an absolute honor for me to have Cushman and Wakefield as today's guest for this episode of Compass Check. And I have Cushman and Wakefield's program leader for their military and veteran program, Matt Disher, here with me today to discuss all the opportunities that are available for transitioning service members and their families, plus our veteran community. Matt, thank you for joining me today.
James, happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. So I'm just going to jump right in so we can get into the fun. One thing that I definitely want to touch on first is you have a military background. So you were in the U.S. Marines. There are no retired Marines, so you're still currently in the Marine mindset, which is great. That's exactly what we need for this episode as we break down these opportunities. But what I want to do is kind of start with what it is that you do at Cushman Wakefield. Give us an idea, let the audience know who you are and what it is that you do.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'll start here. You said what you said before about real estate location. Look, it's location, it's relationships, and it's people. So, all of the answers are right. All of what you said is exactly relevant. Plus everything that we do, and that is the part of the program that I run, focusing around the relationships and the people. In some cases, it's the location. In some cases, it's taking the people into the locations, right? So we're a global company. We have operations in 60 countries. We have 400 offices. We manage about 5 billion square feet of property around the world. Here in the United States, we're about 35,000 people. And we manage properties. We service commercial properties, real estate. That's everything that, as I put it to outsiders, everything that's not a house or a highway can effectively be commercial real estate. So a lot of us are familiar with real estate in the terms of buying and selling houses. That's most of the everyman's exposure to what real estate is. But you imagine this, the football stadium down the street, the skyscraper downtown, the places where you live, work, and shop are all commercial real estate. And there are transactions that happen among those pieces of property, as well as those pieces of property having a need to be managed and maintained from the ground up, from landscaping to the HVAC system, right? So that's really what commercial real estate services entails. What I do is in short, I take some of the best talent in the world, the U.S. Armed Forces veteran and transitioning service member, and I plug them into our industry. I go market to them. I build programs and lead programs around finding those people and being able to plug them into our day-to-day operations. Everything from engineering to human resources. As you know, the military does these types of jobs, the same jobs that we have out here in corporate America. And what I'm trying to do is take the best and brightest among them and take them out of uniform and bring them here into our business as they decide to transition out. So that's the that's a lot of what my team does. It's a lot of where I spend my time. Part of this is alongside of our business leaders and the people that are doing the transactions in our business, helping them to generate relationships with companies with whom we're working in our military and veterans programs. And then, a big piece of my job is getting our brand out there in front of this population of the armed forces and the veteran population across the United States. As you can imagine, we're not a consumer brand. A lot of people don't realize this until I explain it. We're not delivering packages to your front door in 2 days, right? We don't sell lawnmowers and hardware. We are what you call a B2B. We're not a consumer brand. You can't buy anything from us unless you are, effectively looking for commercial real estate services of some sort. And so we have to push just a little bit harder to get our name in front of the potential job seeker or the service member. Even better, the service member in many cases, while they're in uniform, has very little or no exposure to our industry or to our company name. And so last year, my team was responsible for generating just around 10 million digital impressions as we put out marketing. Yeah, so we're effectively sort of a marketing and brand machine, but we're also a recruiting team that takes the best talent out of the armed forces and the veteran population and plugs them into our business.
I mean, you went through a lot there, and what I enjoyed about every single bit of it is one of my underlying thoughts and desires for this podcast, especially during this season, is to demystify a lot of the industries that us as military veterans and transitioning service members have not been exposed to or been exposed to in a very limited fashion.
Right.
So to be able to lower those defenses so we can absorb this type of information, but do it from a trusted source. And a majority of the information and resources and services in the veteran community are transferred by word of mouth, hearing it from another military veteran. And lo and behold, luck has it that I have another military veteran within yourself. So I just want to pause for just a second because I know my audience is on the edge of their seats wondering, wow, knowing that you're in the position that you are with Cushman Wakefield now, what did you do in the Marines that really helped solidify your pathway from the U.S. Armed Forces to Cushman Wakefield today? Can you give us a brief summary of how you got from point A to point B?
Yeah, and my story is atypical. My story is probably like a lot of veterans that did something in the military that necessarily didn't translate to anything out here in the civilian world. And I realize, it's kind of a conundrum. A lot of jobs in the military do have a civilian counterpart, right? They have you can take your medical experience in the military and plug it into a medical job out in the civilian world. You can take your logistics job in the military and plug it into a logistics job out here in the civilian world. Mine was not one of those. I joined the Marines, and there's a story behind this, but I joined the Marines to be a combat engineer.
Mm.
I did the combat engineer MOS because I was told by my older brother who was in the Navy, my father who served in the Navy during Vietnam, my grandfather who served during World War II, lineage of my family, right? People going backwards in time had served in the armed forces, and all of those people, all of the advice that I got, to include the recruiter that brought me into the Marine Corps, they all told me the same thing, and that is to do a job in the military that you can translate into the civilian world, so the transition is a little bit easier. Well, so when I was a kid, I always wanted to paint my face and go out and run around in the woods and put on the camouflage and run around with the toy guns and stuff like that. So I knew I always wanted to do something like that, but that is the type of job that doesn't necessarily have, again, a civilian counterpart to it, right? A machine gunner can't be a machine gunner in the civilian world. And so I chose the combat engineer field because it was the education to me in the recruiting process was that this is the kind of job that would teach me uh, something about the opportunity to do construction management, to do construction, to learn how to build things, to learn how to construct battlefield emplacements and what have you. And I would also get the exposure to what I would call the combat field, right? Be able to put some camouflage paint on my face and go run around with my gun, right? As it turns out, I went through engineer school in Camp Lejeune in North Carolina. and I had very limited exposure to building anything. And for the rest of my Marine Corps career, I didn't build anything ever. I I was always attached to an infantry unit. I was always doing explosives. I was blowing things up. I was running alongside of an amphibious raid group, Fox Company 2-1 out of Camp Pendleton for a couple of years on a deployment. Uh, really cool stuff to make video games and movies out of, but it doesn't translate too much out here in the civilian world. So I think the short part of this is when I left the Marine Corps, I had one of those obligatory tough transitions. I thought that I could write my resume and say, "Hey, look at all the cool tactical stuff that I did," and that somebody would want to take me under their wing and bring me into an organization and teach me how to do a job. Much to my chagrin, that was not the case. And my resume reflected that I could blow things up and shoot guns. And as cool as I thought that was, that didn't do anything for me on the outside. And so I took that personally. I wasn't blaming anybody else, but I took it personally that I didn't know how to do anything with that. I didn't know how to turn myself into whatever I needed to become. So fast forward a handful of years, I got out in 2004, and I I found myself often advising companies and leaders on what military specialties look like, what military backgrounds look like. If you go back 10, 15 years, for a long time when a lot of veterans were leaving Iraq and Afghanistan and coming home, America looked at them and said, "Hey, we need to do the right thing and plug these men and women into opportunities." And what I always thought was, we're not doing the right thing. It's not a charity. We should be taking them because they are the best talent in the world. They are experienced, they're diverse, they're educated, they have all of this experience in what I would call zero fail environments. They are the smartest, best, and brightest among us. And it's a business imperative to bring them into our businesses and allow them, kind of set them free inside of our businesses and allow them to come contribute to our operations. And so uh, I have worked in a handful of companies in my career post military where I was building and leading these types of programs. To answer the question about how I ended up at Cushman Wakefield, I was working in an organization where I was advising some large scale clients on how to build their own military and veterans programs. And I got a call from Cushman Wakefield one day, and they said, "We need somebody to come build and lead these types of programs inside of our organization." They had already had a handful of years behind them of putting a program like this together, but they needed somebody with the talent facing structure. And they asked me if I could move to Chicago or St. Louis, and I said I can't move to either of those places, but I'm telling you right now, I am your guy, and I will take this thing to the moon. And they hired me, and we have since in 2023 we are ranked number 6 on the national military friendly employer list. So
Boom.
we have taken it to the moon, and did exactly what I promised I would do with them. And I'll tell you, we haven't even scratched the surface quite yet. We're still doing a lot of amazing things, and there's still a lot more amazing things to come.
So I definitely have to point out, Matt, you spoke to my infantry heart, knowing that after I got out in 2014, I kept trying to find different things that I could infantry, but no one was looking for the machine gunners and
Right.
anyone to breach buildings in the industries that I was applying to. So exactly to your point, like my heart goes out to you, but I will say I honed in on the zero failure environment.
Hmm.
Like a lot of individuals in corporate America think about the high stress environments that some industries bring, but in the armed forces, a lot of us are working in those zero fail environments. So that resource pool that we're taking from has an experience level that many of the people in corporate America have not seen or seen displayed in a way to really showcase how it can benefit any organization that they move into.
Right.
And like just having you here as a representation of how you can transition from any of the branches of service doing a myriad of different jobs to doing what you do today is really a testament to the flexibility and the dedication that you can get out of the military and veteran community.
Right.
Just lastly, before I take us into a little bit more of the organization that is Cushman Wakefield, I'd like to know, is there anything that stands out to you from your time in the Marines that you still hold on to a skill, an experience, maybe a piece of advice that you got from a mentor that continues to make you successful to this day?
That's a great question, and something you mentioned just now is that I don't think a lot of veterans really fully understand that they should be taking advantage of is mentorship, is asking questions of people who are already there and who have been there and done that. Um, something I mentioned before is that while combat occupations, infantry, etc., doesn't necessarily have the direct civilian counterpart, right? You can't come out of the military and be a machine gunner in the civilian space. What you can take out of jobs like that is leadership, it's planning, it's training, it's troop welfare, it's mission accomplishment. Taking all of those things um, that every military operation needs. We talked about the zero fail environments. What happens when we fail in the military? People get hurt or people get killed, or we lose millions of dollars of equipment, or all three of those all at once, right? We can't do that type of thing out in the civilian workspace because uh businesses are working for bottom line impact, right? We get fired from our jobs if we are out here accidentally wasting millions of dollars or people getting hurt on the job. Think about health and safety in the workspace. Um, so, to answer your question, I think it's all of those things. It is the mentality that I learned that in which I was indoctrinated as a Marine. And that was that I have to represent this organization and these men and women that have worked and lived and operated alongside of me. I take that into the rest of my life. I take that pride point into the rest of my life, and that is being a professional, being the best at what we do, working the hardest. You can see all the athletes always talk about this, that hard work is the essence of success. You don't have to be necessarily the smartest person in the room, but you can outwork everybody out there. That is something that I took away from the Marine Corps that I continue to wear on my back for the rest of my life, is that if I don't know what I'm doing, or if I don't know how to be successful, I need to tap into that work ethic and go figure it out, right? And I will carry the load. I will bear the weight of the burden, uh, and make sure that I am accomplishing that mission. The one of those things that we always took away from every Marine Corps operation was, the number one priority was mission accomplishment. I still use that on a day to day basis, but I also pick up little tidbits, little bits of information, and pieces of my success that are attributed to mentors along the way, from the military to civilian executive leaders, that I ask for, bits and pieces of advice. But I think it is number one, mission accomplishment, doing the job the best I can do it, by putting in my work ethic and elbow grease.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and say that you are not only just achieving the standard, you are exceeding it. So you are an excellent representation of not only service in the armed forces, but what the veteran community can do to support one another and continue to be that positive example and influence inside of our communities. Speaking of that, I know you're a positive example and influence inside of Cushman Wakefield. And one of the more direct programs that you work with is your military veteran program, MVP. So I'd like for you to lay that out for us as best as you can to give our listening audience an idea of what this program entails and also how they can become attached to it.
Yeah, so the best way to explain our military and veterans programs at Cushman Wakefield is to explain our three pillars that we serve, and that is people, brand, and business. The people element I talked about a little bit. We are responsible for bringing in the best talent from the armed forces through a number of different mediums. So I mentioned to you in the beginning that we were responsible for around 10 million digital impressions. A lot of it is a plan around marketing to put our job opportunities and our company name and our information in front of this veteran population, which is, roughly 7% of the US population. If you cut that down into people that are actually in the workforce, it's probably about half of that 7%. People who are, I think if you look at the veteran population, you've got Cold War era or Vietnam era veterans and older are excluded from that workforce. They're in retirement age. So the people that are younger than that right now are still in the workforce, and we're trying to reach population of men and women who are interested in coming to look at opportunities, job opportunities, career opportunities. So we spend a lot of time fostering relationships with organizations that are living and working in this space to reach these men and women. Uh, we do a lot of digital marketing on social media, LinkedIn, any other place where we can find and or reach military and veterans and military spouses, which I'll talk about here in a second. That's a
Oh, yeah.
yeah, that's an underpinning of our people, our people pillar. So we run a world class Department of Defense skill bridge program here. If you're not familiar with skill bridge, we were an early adopter of this. It's one of those programs that, in my opinion, aims to solve historic and generational issues of military transition. And that is, when people got out of the military in my time, I had to hang up the uniform, come home, and then figure it out, right? There was no LinkedIn back then. There wasn't a way for me to explore opportunities. I just simply had to get home and then go apply for jobs. Uh, SkillBridge, in short, allows that service member to start exploring organizations and companies through internship for up to 6 months. Generally, it's around 3 to 4 months. But those people are allowed to come into our business and work as interns while they're still on the DoD payroll. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, they're sort of in the transition. They haven't taken off the uniform yet. But our whole purpose around this is that now we get you for 3 or 4 months to get you exposed and immersed in our industry. And then at the end of your internship, at the end of your active duty service, we'll offer you a full-time role, and then you just
Oh,
transition directly into the company in a full-time job. So we're easing the transition by allowing you this sort of test drive exposure to our company. And you can also
hmm.
decide during SkillBridge, you can be like, hey, you know what? This isn't the industry for me. I want to go work at this other company. And that happens sometimes, right? Um, we didn't have that opportunity historically in the military. Again, people would come home for generations upon generations. They would come home and struggle to figure out what happened next. So we run the DoD SkillBridge program. We're also a military spouse employment partner, and it's a DoD program that aims at employing the military spouse. There are somewhere around 5 or 600,000 active duty military spouses in the U.S.
Mm.
Armed Forces, and
Wow.
they're chronically underemployed and unemployed. They're exceptionally diverse. They're about, to my notes, I think around 93% women. And every year or so, they're moving around and going to different parts of the world and different parts of the
Hmm.
country, and that makes it really hard to hold down a full time job. And so, as a partner, we've committed to uh, being able to explore jobs that might be either A, remote or hybrid, or B, they can take a property administration job and live in North Carolina. And if they get moved to California, there's probably a similar property administration job out on the West Coast. In any company, there's not a guarantee of those things, but those jobs can translate across the country, and it's able for them to, or it makes it able for them to move a little bit easier without having to switch jobs every couple of years. So we do a lot of that. We've got just team resources dedicated around when a candidate knocks on our door and says, I'm a veteran or I'm leaving the military. What options do I have? We're able to plug them into different resources, even some cases, informational interviews with people inside of our company that are doing the work already. So they can figure out, what does a project manager look like in construction? Do I want to do that type of job in Denver? Right. So that's the people brand, the people pillar. Brand is exactly what I said before. Fostering this digital brand, right? Being able to put our brand out there in a positive light to a large population of men and women who are serving or who have served in the military. But beyond that, uh, a lot of people are culturally tied to military and veteran populations. So even people who haven't served in the military have somebody in their family or a close friend who has
Yep.
served in the military. So it's relative to all of us, and we're betting on that, right? And then the business brand, the business element is this: that we have clients and pursuits unapologetically. We look at this type of program and say it also serves a purpose of us working alongside of our clients to generate better business relationships. So a lot of our clients are also top ranked military friendly employers, and or they are companies that have this military culture within them. And because we are running these world class programs, I often find myself on the phone with some of our clients or companies with whom we're working alongside, one way or the other, explaining what the playbook is for them to also build these types of programs. And I'll take it. I'll wrap it up with this: that historically these programs are looked at as nice to haves. It's I always throw my fist out and go, "Hey, we're doing the right thing, right?" We're we're taking it further than that and trying to explain that doing the right thing by the veteran population does not allow us to have more dollars to grow and expand our program, to do more marketing, to do more veteran events and career events and things like that. What does allow us to expand that is tying an actual dollar amount back to the relationships that we foster in business, which allows us to say, hey, we can do more hiring, we can do more sponsorships and support, we can do more work alongside of nonprofit, veteran focused nonprofits when we are able to tie it back to a dollar amount or a bottom line. And that's really what every business in America is looking for. It becomes business imperative.
I mean, just looking at those three different elements. When it comes to the people, the two things that I want to hone in on: skill bridge. Everything about that is a fabulous program, but the main thing that it gives the service member that's transitioning, trying to feel out where they're going to be able to land, is they still get the opportunity to have a paycheck at the end of the day. So it's not on them to figure out, hey, how can I do this and still pay my bills? So it gives a certain level of security to the service member, but it also takes a certain level of burden off the organization so they can fully focus on providing that knowledge, that skill set, but that additional understanding of, hey, this is what you're going to get when you come through our doors and you join our team. And the same thing for military spouses, which is a topic that's not talked about a lot. When you look at the typical military spouse's resume, they can be all over the place. They can move from different cities and different states, staying for random amounts of time, having a variety of different occupations that they've taken on while they've done a lot of this geographic transition. So to be able to understand that environment and that element is a huge benefit for an organization to be able to hold on to that talent and not just cut them loose and say, "Oh, you're going to." South Carolina, we really can't help you. But to have that flexibility lets them know that I have someone in my corner, regardless of what corner of the world that I'm in.
Right.
And that is huge. That is huge. That is huge. And just lastly, on the brand, I've been out of the military for just about 10 years now. And I can't even count on my hands and toes how many times I've seen Cushman Wakefield out at a military event, a veteran event, some type of community building event, just to get out there and be known in the community and let each and every one of us know that even if you're not interested at this time, know that our doors always open and we want you to know who we are. That is key. That is, it's rambling around in my mind each and every single time that I schedule a guest for the podcast is who needs that opportunity to reinforce who it is that they are and what industry that they're working in so we understand. A lot of us were so laser focused on what we did in the military that we didn't get enough exposure to a variety of different industries that want us, that need us,
Right.
and that are looking for us to join their ranks. So this was just one of those conversations that really make my heart swell. But I'm going to take it back to the audience because I'm sure a lot of them would like to know what are some of the skills, what are some of the pieces of experience that Cushman Wakefield would look for in a veteran or transitioning service member that's looking to join your team.
Yeah, this is probably a universal answer. It's the answer is this: what is every company looking for? You're looking for people that have decision making capability. You're looking for people
Mm.
that can come in and lead others or take instruction from others, right? So not everybody in the military or coming out of the military wants to be an executive leader. And not everybody in the civilian space is really good at taking instruction or taking orders, right? People in the military can do both equally. And we're an industry that, in a lot of cases, it's highly competitive. Real estate is highly competitive. There are a lot of companies that with whom we're competing. Um, some of our competitors, we also do work alongside it. We show up at the same events and things like that. But what sets us a level ahead of a lot of our competitors is the people that we have working inside of our business. Those people can make the decisions. They have the institutional knowledge. Uh, if they don't have the institutional knowledge, they go figure it out, right? And that's something that we talk about
Mm.
in the military. I always explain, the average military career, let's say somebody who spends 4 or 8 years in the armed forces, you typically go through an MOS or an A school or something like that, where you learn how to do your primary function. But we often get handed a lot of jobs and responsibilities along the way for which we have no formal education. We
Yeah.
didn't go to school for all the other things that we do. We just had to learn them along the way. And that's what a job in corporate America looks like in a lot of cases. I can't tell you how many jobs I've been hired into where I had the initial interview and they asked me a lot of questions about my knowledge and things like that. But ultimately, when I asked them, like, what do you want out of me? The answer was, we want you to produce more than what we're producing right now. Figure it out. The instructions were not necessarily there. I had to create the instructions. And that is, and we talk about, again, the infantry leader on the battlefield. The plan goes out the window, as we all know, when the gunfire starts. Uh,
Yeah.
you can have the best laid plans in the world, and the reason why you train and train and train and work as a team, as an element, and you communicate, as we always say, you shoot, move, and communicate. The reason why you get really good at that is because the plan goes directly out the window in the first 5 minutes of a gunfight. And while we're not slinging lead in corporate America, what we are doing in a lot of cases is adjusting at a very rapid level. We have to look at the markets. Let's just take the last 3 years as an example. COVID, right?
Oh,
Uh,
oh.
the economy was great. COVID, boom, everything stopped one day, and it stopped, and it started, and it stopped, and it started, and it stopped, and it started for on and off, depending on where you lived. Your local or regional or state government may have turned things on, turned them off, turned them on, turned it off. So for a lot of people, that was people were pulling their hair out. For me, as a Marine veteran, and probably for you, for a lot of us, we were probably like, "Oh yeah, I mean, this is concerning, but look, this is every training evolution in the Marine Corps. This is every time I showed up to the grinder at 04 to wait for the trucks that weren't going to pick me up until noon, right? We
Yep.
stopped and started a million times, and now we're looking at the COVID restrictions are lifted, and now suddenly the economy is taking a spiral. So again, we're looking at another change. We have to be adaptive. We have to be adaptable to what's happening. Uh, and I could talk about all day the skills and skill sets and qualities we're looking for in veterans. The Those are some of the what I would call the soft skills, the ability to adapt and make decisions and learn and lead and function in austere environments and things like that. Uh, Hard skills, I would say this: we frequently look for people who can work in engineering and maintenance capacities, right? That's like I
Mhm.
often talk about, if you can manage processes and systems on a ship, on an aircraft carrier, on a frigate, on a submarine, or among aircraft or among facilities in the military, you can very well transition into a role inside of our industry. If you can
Wow.
manage propulsion systems and damage control systems and nuclear power, again, on a submarine or aircraft carrier, you can manage the systems inside of or read schematics inside of a skyscraper downtown. So those are really easily translatable skills that we take out of the armed forces. If you can take apart an F-22 and put it back together, you can work in the office park down the street. If you can lead people, if you have taken custody of property, logistical property, where you're in charge of millions of dollars of equipment, and maybe you're servicing that equipment, you have to make sure the right parts are in the right place and that you have your contractors in place. That could effectively be something like property management in our industry. And then this is the other one that we talk about in a lot of industries. And you mentioned all the big companies out there that are consumer brands. A lot of veterans look at those brands at face value. They know the one company that's delivering packages to your front door, right? They know who's selling hardware. They know the airline companies. But what you don't see is behind the scenes, all of those companies have the accounting people, they have the HR people, they have the recruiters, they have the operations, the logistics, et cetera, et cetera. So we're just the same. We have HR and recruiting and accounting and client accounting and all the different elements that go into a business. The hospital down the street also has HR and accounting and all of these different things. So we're hiring those types of people as well. So if you did accounting or you did bookkeeping in the military or you did logistics in the military, you can very easily transition into a career inside of commercial real estate in some facet of the business.
My ears started ringing when you said two specific words right next to each other. We're hiring. Um, I'm hoping that I'm not putting the cart before the horse. Are you all hiring right now?
We are hiring. We are hiring across the United States.
Oh my gosh. So let's turn that inward then, and say, we do have someone that gets hired on. A lot of our experience from the military, you were in an environment, the zero fail environment, and it like sometimes it was very unforgiving. It could be hard on the mind, it could be hard on the body, it could be hard on the family, and there weren't as many resources that we would like in order to provide additional support to the service member and their family. I do want to turn that to Cushman Wakefield right now because I, did some research and I understand that you all have a veteran employee resource group inside of your organization, and I'm sure it's across the nation. But can you give me a little bit more insight into some of the support channels that group provides?
Yeah, and I'd say this at a larger level, we have a number of employee resource groups for
Mm,
for a whole bunch of different affinities, and so what I found is that veterans have, in a lot of cases, we have our own personal networks of our friends and family back home, and sometimes we enter a company and we want to know a handful of other veterans in that company that have been there and done that in the same places we've been there and done that. But we also have additional ERGs for any other group that you'd like to join. And so, yeah, the purpose behind the ERGs is there's probably a bunch of different ways to explain these, but I would tell you for the person that joins the organization, what it does is it creates a community of people that have similar interests that they're pursuing, and those might be special interests. They might be project groups. They might be organizations, communities that you're trying to do community
oh,
work or organizate
very cool.
working alongside of organizations at a local level. You might want to do some volunteer work. It just creates a community. One of the things that we talk about as a major challenge for people leaving the armed forces is the loss of tribe, as we say, the loss of community. I often illustrate it as such that you're inside of a room with all the people with whom you work and live and operate on a day-to-day basis. You all wear the same clothing, you speak the same language in many cases. You might look different, you might be from different places, but you all come together with this one commonality in that you are part of a military element or a military unit. And you can see outside of that room. You can look out the windows sometimes, but you really wholly live inside of that room. And then one day that door opens and they ask just you to leave, and then you have to go join another room. And everything
Mm,
you knew is still inside of that room that you just left. What we're aiming with an ERG is to duplicate the community that you had inside of that room. That is for many service members, as I mentioned, a lot of their challenge. So a lot of their challenges stem from that loss of community, loss of having people to lean on. That's effectively at large what an ERG, what a veterans ERG aims to do is to give them some resources to plug back into should they have a challenge one way or the other. Um, for me, it was always, hey, I have a dumb question about the business. Can I lean on another veteran to ask a dumb question to without being judged? And the answer is yes.
yeah.
I can go knock on another devil dog's door and be like, hey, listen, man, I don't know what's going on here. And that person's going to be like, hey, no sweat. Let me explain it to you. Right. Instead of me going and saying, hey, I'm a Marine and asking a non-Marine, like, I have a really dumb question. And they're like, oh, I don't know what that is. We just have a different people in the military. Often have a different style of communication. It's very direct, in especially, in the, if we're talking about the combat arms specialties, combat arms jobs in the military, like, where you stand, right? There is no beating around the bush. The statements and the feedback is concise and true. Um, and so oftentimes we don't get that same type of environment in corporate America, or you may risk your feelings getting hurt. And so it is nice to go knock on another veteran's door and be like, "Hey, how are we doing? What's going on? What is this? What is that?" And then them giving you a very direct, concise answer that may be maybe not the same answer that you get from somebody who hasn't served in that capacity.
What I tell veterans frequently is what organization you work for is important, but how they treat you while you're there is even more important. Those are some of those follow up questions when you're in that interview and they give you the opportunity to ask, hey, do you have any questions for us? What is the company culture like? Are there those opportunities similar to Cushman Wake? Is there an employee resource group? Are there opportunities for me to get out into my community? Are there things that can help fulfill me beyond my 9 to 5, 9 to 6 profession? Because we want we want veterans, we want all people to show up to work as their holistic self. So having an organization that can embrace you and be able to take on your holistic self is meaningful and is part of that purpose that we all seek after the military. So just my last question for this particular segment is going to focus on mainly if you could describe the environment, the company culture at Cushman and Wakefield in 1 or 2 words to our veteran listening audience, what words would you use to describe it?
You know, I would say it is inclusive and it is communicative.
Mm,
There's there are a lot of moving parts in a lot of different entities. So we have a bunch of different business lines. They serve different purposes inside of the business. But what I would tell you is if you're new to the company, and oftentimes in a lot of companies, a lot of large companies, what ends up happening is you are hired into a specific group to do a specific job. And sometimes you might not have exposure to another element of that business, right? Because it's not the work function in which you work. This is the type of company where if you came to me and said, "Hey, Matt, I'm new to the company. I'm doing construction project management, but I'd like to learn more about our multifamily group." I can
mm,
introduce you to somebody in the multifamily group who would spend some time with you telling you exactly how the multifamily group works. I had a conversation with one of my counterparts this morning on flexible workspace. Quite honestly, before you and I jumped on the phone, there was a conversation around flexible workspace, which is an element of our business, a really hot topic these days in
yeah.
modern workspace. And I just quite simply asked again to another veteran inside of the business, former Army infantry officer, um, who's working in one of our leadership roles. I just said, explain to me, as though I know nothing, how does the flexible workspace relationship work inside of our company? And I got a good 15 to 20-minute answer on how we play and work in that space. So I felt I from those conversations, I feel included and I feel like the communication is strong because now I'm able to come in and learn something that is maybe outside of my wheelhouse, and learn something new that maybe I didn't know when I woke up this morning.
Well, you were firing me up. I mean, you've already answered one of my upcoming questions about hybrid schedules, working from home, transferability, flexibility, all of that. I think you've touched on well enough. I'm going to start to wrap up because I know that you're a busy person. You have a lot of things to do besides chatting it up with me. Even though this has been a blast, I would like to put you in a room with the young Marine that was just getting out in 2004. If you could tell your younger self anything about the current profession that you're doing right now, what would be some of the pieces of information or maybe pieces of advice that you would give to your younger Marine self?
I would take I would have a little bit more confidence in the work that I'm doing. It took me
Mm,
a while after the military, as many people leave the military, sometimes they're on top of the world and then they will come out of the military and have to start over again, right? It took me a little bit of time to understand, especially when put in a capacity, a decision making role or a decision making capacity, to make quicker decisions, to take a little bit more charge of that. what I often did when I was younger is I would hesitate. I would do exactly the thing that we said not to do in the military, which is, paralysis by overanalysis, right? Sometimes I
Oh,
would I
wow.
would
I like that.
overanalyze. It wasn't until later in my career that somebody told me, let's if we're going to fail, we fail fast and fail cheap, but don't be afraid to take risks and don't be afraid of failure. And that was something that happened at a previous company in which I worked. An executive gave me that advice, and it was probably game changing advice for me because then I stopped worrying about what if this doesn't work, right? What if this doesn't do what I want it to do? And he told me, that's business. Sometimes it doesn't do what you want it to do. You just have to adjust and adapt very quickly. So that would be one piece: taking more command of my decisions and owning my decisions. Uh, I think along those lines, I mentioned one of those biggest pieces of advice that I got was from an executive. It would be pursuing mentorship from people uh, that from whom I would like to learn. Knocking on their door and simply asking them, "Can I get a handful of your time? Can I get a half an hour? Can I take you to coffee? Can I do all these things?" Especially people inside of your company. Um, Executive leaders in a well-run organization should not be out of touch, even for the most junior level person. It's not like the military, where as the young PFC in the Marines can't approach the colonel because there's a chain of command. We don't want to jump ranks.
Yeah.
In corporate America, in a lot of cases, if you simply pursue that relationship, given your company's culture or processes and policies, you don't want to break their rules. But if they don't have policy around this, reach out to those people and have a set of questions that you'd like to ask them. How did you get where you're going? What do I need to know to get to your level eventually? Asking questions like that are completely relevant. And what I found is that people like to talk about themselves. Uh, Exploit that. Use that. Use the idea that people like to talk about themselves to get all of the best advice. Learn from their mistakes. Learn from their successes. Seek mentorship. Have a lot of mentors. Ask the questions you need to ask. Um, because for a lot of us, and myself included, I wasted a handful of years not asking those questions. So if I could go back and tell myself as a young transitioning Marine any couple of things aside from investing in certain companies, putting all of my investments in certain companies, right? Um, it would be those things. It would be to seek mentorship and be confident with the decisions we make, as long as our decisions are educated, based on information and data.
I mean, I loved Back to the Future, and that was one of the things that I wish I could always do was, get that almanac that shows me, all the sports bets that I need to make.
Yep.
But I appreciate you leaning in on mentorship. As I close this out, Cushman Wakefield, there's no hyphen. CushmanWakefield.com is where you can go online to check out a lot of the stuff that we were discussing, the MVP program, the military veteran program, to the information about military spouses, but also about the veteran employee resource groups and the other groups that Cushman and Wakefield has to offer for their employees.
Yeah, one
Um,
one one step further than that, cushwakevets.com.
oh,
Cushwakevets.com takes you right into our military and veterans portal. It takes you to the skill bridge page, takes you to the military spouse page. There's all kinds of great information and testimonials in there as well.
I had a PFC do all my research, so they got the website wrong. Like I'm like, this is the PFC going up to the colonel. Like my heart is dropping. Please don't talk to the sir. Um, but like one of the last things I'd like to ask: would you be okay if people reached out to you specifically, say on LinkedIn,
Yes.
to make that connection?
Absolutely. I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. It's part of the brand building process. I absolutely tell people to find me on LinkedIn. There are not too many Matt Dishers in the world. It's not a very common name, but Matt Disher at Cushman Wakefield. That's where I reside. So absolutely find me on there, and or find us on cushwakevets.com.
I think that is one of the tragedies of today's day and time is there aren't more Matt Dishers out there. But the one that we have here, prime time. I appreciate you coming on with me today. The last question that I have for you that I'd like to uh, highlight is: are you all hiring right now?
We are hiring across the United States. So there are plenty of job opportunities. We serve a lot of clients. Some of the biggest names in business that are clients of ours. And those are companies that continue to expand despite the economy and what the economy is doing. There is still expansion. Buildings aren't going anywhere. Properties aren't going anywhere. The properties that we manage are not going anywhere. And so we always need great people to come join our ranks.
And with that, I'm going to go ahead and let you go because I'm sure there's going to be a flurry of phone calls, emails, and LinkedIn action that you need to take on from our listening audience that understands the great opportunities that are available to them across the nation at Cushman and Wakefield. So, Matt, my favorite devil dog, I appreciate you taking the time to join me today. I cannot wait to connect with you again just to hear about the amazing things that you have going on in the future.
Thank you so much for having me today.
No problem. And with that, my listening audience, you've gotten the information, you've got the direction. Now use that compass and check your way into a new opportunity as you transition out of the military and into the corporate workforce. I will see you next time. Thank you for listening to Compass Check with AmeriVet Securities. I've been your host, James Fitzgerald. See you next time.